Hello there. I'm Professor Becky Francis, CEO of the Education Endowment Foundation. Thanks so much for welcoming me to your conference. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the need for education recovery across the globe. I'm going to talk then a little bit about the EEF, Education Endowment Foundation, EEF for short, and its approach. And then I'm going to talk about an evidence-led approach to support recovery in reading. Now, at the Education Endowment Foundation, we work to improve academic outcomes for socially, economically disadvantaged pupils from the age of 2 to 19. And we do that by supporting evidence use across the English education system. Since 2011, we've worked to equip practitioners, school leaders, and school policymakers with the knowledge of what works in education by commissioning and analysing education research. We want to establish what we already know about boosting outcomes, identify and scale new approaches that can positively impact learning, and crucially support schools, nurseries and colleges to put evidence to use effectively in their settings. We pride ourselves on being an independent organisation committed to transparency and being led solely by the evidence. Now, of course, educational inequality existed pre-pandemic, and in the UK context, social background is by far the most significant indicator of educational outcomes. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see some indicators about the importance here. So free school meals is the indicator that we use in the UK to indicate child poverty. And you can see that in relation to GCSEs, that's our General Certificate of School Education, the exams that all children take at age 16 at the end of compulsory schooling in the UK, these big gaps that we see according to poverty and social background. And these have a really big impact, of course, on further study and opportunities for further career progress as well. And on the left-hand side of your screen, you see that infographic showing how there are already gaps in school readiness before children arrive in school in the early years, but that rather than narrowing those gaps as children move through the school system, actually the gap grows wider. So it's those gaps that the EEF and my organisation are set to try to challenge and reverse. But of course, the COVID pandemic has made things even worse. So the disproportionate negative impact of COVID on children and young people from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds meant the attainment gap between socioeconomically disadvantaged children and their classmates widened even further across all age groups. Research has shown that many disadvantaged students didn't have adequate access to electronic devices for learning during lockdown, that digital divide, and often they didn't have adequate conditions for learning. And disadvantaged pupils spent longer in self-isolation and had less access to school provisions while doing so. And this next slide shows the different gaps and also attainment outcomes according to reading, writing and maths across the years before and then during the pandemic. And you can see that there's two groups of lines for reading, maths and writing. The lines at the top of the graph show more advantaged students, those not on free school meals. And then the lines at the bottom of the graph show the progress and outcomes for disadvantaged pupils, i.e. those that are on free school meals. So basically the graph shows three different things. Firstly, that gap between socially disadvantaged students and the rest, which you can see existed substantially before the pandemic as well. Then the learning loss that all pupils in the UK have experienced across these different subject areas. But thirdly, the widening of that existing gap over the period of the pandemic, so from 2019 to 2022. Of course, we know that this has been mirrored often across the world. A source for Asia was the UNESCO and UNICEF study, which found a large increase in school dropouts and also large learning losses. And a more recent working paper for the World Bank from May 2022 estimates that the average learning loss globally is around half a year's progress. So that's really incredible. And focusing on reading, learning loss has been significant on reading in the UK context, as you can see from this slide. Studies in England have shown a consistent difference between cohorts disrupted by the pandemic and pre-pandemic groups, ranging from between 2 to 3.5 months of progress. And we know, as I've said, that this finding isn't unique to England, with similar studies across many countries, including studies across the US and that UNESCO publication I referenced already, showing similar learning loss in Asia. And as you can see, that reading loss has been disproportionate for disadvantaged students in the UK case. So to support teachers and school leaders in improving provision and tackling this recovery challenge, the EEF takes a three-pronged approach. First of all, evidence generation. We commission robust studies of educational programs in order to assess their actual impacts on pupil progress. Many initiatives make bold claims about improving outcomes. Our independent evaluations present findings that teachers can trust when deciding whether to invest in a new approach. Then we synthesize the evidence. The EEF regularly reviews the existing international research base, drawing out findings from other robust studies so that teachers and school leaders can access information about teaching and learning approaches that have proven effective in other classrooms. And then we mobilize the evidence. We recognize that producing and summarizing research isn't enough in itself to support behavior change in the system. We work to mobilize our findings and engage education professionals. So we'll just take a quick look at the key pillars of our approach, starting with evidence generation. Most of our resources are spent on assessing the impact of specific interventions and approaches on pupils' academic outcomes. We set high standards for research evidence and favour robust trial conditions to identify effective and sometimes non-effective practices. And we always commission an independent evaluation in order to avoid bias separate from the programmes team. And we always publish results without fear or favour. When we commission a trial of any programme, we want to find out if it's had a positive impact on outcomes. If an intervention is shown to be effective, we support scale-up activity, which allows the approach to be implemented in more classrooms. An example is the Nuffield Early Language Intervention. This programme works in the early years to support young children who are struggling with early language, particularly relevant within the pandemic. That programme was proven to be effective via 2 different EEF-funded randomised controlled trials, and was subsequently scaled to schools across England as part of the government's education recovery package for the pandemic. And we continue to support our most effective interventions to thrive and develop to scale via promotion and partnerships with other organisations. In addition to our work in evidence generation, we also prioritise evidence synthesis so that we can draw out lessons on important findings from the existing evidence base. These evidence reviews also feed into our flagship resource, the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, and you can see a screenshot of the top of the toolkit pages on your screen now. The toolkit comprises an accessible summary of over 2,600 studies, which indicate the potential impacts and cost effectiveness of a broad range of popular teaching and learning approaches. It's regularly updated to include the latest evidence and has proven really popular with the sector. 70% of school leaders in the UK use the Teaching and Learning Toolkit to inform their decision making. And what you can see on your screen, as I say, is the top of the list of different approaches on the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. You can find these on our website. For each approach, we indicate three things based on the digest of the literature. First of all, the cost of the particular approach, as indicated by the number of pound signs. Secondly, the relative security of the research evidence underpinning the approach, indicated by the number of padlocks to show security. And then thirdly, and crucially, in the bubbles with a number on the right-hand side of the screen, showing the average month's progress for pupils delivered by this approach. And this has proved, as I say, because of its accessibility, very popular with teachers. We encourage teachers to combine this evidence with their professional expertise. Teachers know best about their local context and then the relevance of different approaches for that geographical context as well. And then thirdly, we of course mobilise the evidence and seek to engage educationalists with our research. This approach reflects our research school network across England, where research schools are working with other schools in their local area to spread research information. We also have our freely available resources distilling the research evidence, again in engaging ways that teachers can access, and all of these are freely available on our website. And we work closely with policymakers, including the Department for Education in the UK, to curate research evidence and ensure that research and policy programmes are well evidenced, and to support policy making more generally. And this mission to ingrain evidence in education isn't limited to England. We also work with a range of international partners. We're committed to global collaboration. More and better evidence of high potential approaches and programmes will feed directly into the global evidence synthesis on which our Teaching and Learning Toolkit is based. That also helps us fill gaps more quickly and will benefit teachers and students across the world. Thanks to the generous support of the BHP Billiton Foundation, the EEF has established 6 international partnerships covering 20 countries across the globe who are keen to further integrate evidence into their education systems. You can see from the map that we've got a glaring omission in Asia. So if any colleagues are interested, we're always keen to partner and collaborate. And through this work, we're supporting a network of organisations across the globe with the collective capacity to increase the volume, quality and use of evidence, leading to better decisions in schools and better learning outcomes for students. Our partners are contextualising and translating the Teaching and Learning Toolkit for other global contexts. The toolkit's been translated into many different languages already, and the trials conducted globally feed into the toolkit to make it in turn more internationally relevant. So just touching on some key findings now, including key findings on reading. We find that evidence can inform approaches to support reading and wider literacy. Our Teaching and Learning Toolkit systematically reviews evidence and shows promising approaches here. Phonics and reading comprehension strategies are highly effective reading strategies for alphabetically based systems, such as the English language. It's also important to combine other effective pedagogical strategies like feedback or metacognitive approaches. Our evaluations also show other promising approaches here, including a program that delivers personalized reading support targeted using diagnostic assessment, and another comprising a targeted reading comprehension strategy for struggling readers. And all of these different approaches and programs and their evaluations are available on our website if you're interested. Another useful finding is that just giving kids books isn't enough. We've evaluated programs that use light touch approaches to reading for pleasure that actually were found to have a negative impact on reading. So again, checking the evidence and actual robust evaluation is super important. Now, strategies like phonics won't be appropriate in many languages. For example, we're currently collaborating with the Queen Rania Foundation in Jordan to explore the best strategies for teaching literacy in Arabic. For languages where memorization is important, we found promising results from spacing approaches to recall, and are currently funding new research on best strategies to improve recall, influenced by cognitive science approaches. In all of this, we find that, of course, teaching quality is key. The evidence is very clear that it's high quality teaching that makes the best impact on pupil progress. And we find hearteningly that teachers and education professionals are hugely keen and have a huge appetite for evidence. You can see here through these different indicators the different uptakes and metrics for teacher engagement with our research evidence in the UK, and we find this incredibly heartening for a sound profession. Another key message is the importance of the early years. Implementation in the early years and that importance of early intervention are critical. It's shown that early intervention can be the most cost effective, and of course also addresses some of those early gaps with which kids arrive in the system before they have time to grow further as young people progress through the education system. And another message is about the importance of the way that we implement research findings and research-led programs in the classroom. Even when the theory and background evidence is strong, nothing's guaranteed to work if it's not implemented well. So we have a guidance report that is dedicated to supporting school leaders and teachers to implement the evidence effectively. Now, evidence doesn't provide easy solutions, but evidence-informed improvement is a process that has integrity and holds huge promise. For more information about the EEF or to keep in touch, please do visit our website and our social media, or sign up for our fortnightly EEF news alerts. It's really important to say in conclusion, the COVID pandemic has highlighted grave learning loss and inequalities, but it's also opened opportunities and stimulated dialogue and collaboration across the globe. There's a real opportunity for us to share research and experience in a global effort to support recovery and address long-standing inequalities, to ensure that every child has the chance to thrive irrespective of their background. Thank you very much for listening.